Marcus sat at the grand dining table, the room buzzing with the kind of artificial warmth that only a family gathering could produce. Glasses clinked, laughter rippled, but beneath it all, there was an undercurrent, an invisible thread of expectation woven through every interaction. He felt it. They were waiting. His wife, Hailey, sat across from him, radiant in that manufactured way she had perfected, hair impeccable, smile just the right blend of warmth and calculation. She had been buttering up the family all evening, playing the benevolent matriarch in training, the woman who took care of everyone. But Marcus knew better. She wasn't here to host. She was here to secure his money. And sure enough, just as dessert plates were being cleared, Hailey stood and tapped her wine glass with the confidence of a woman who believed she already owned the outcome. "Everyone," she began, flashing that rehearsed grin. "I just want to take a moment to express how grateful I am for this family. We've always stood together through everything." She made a show of looking at Marcus then, her fingers grazing the back of his hand. "And I know we'll continue to support each other, just like we always have." There it was. The setup. Marcus leaned back in his chair, silent, swirling the deep red wine in his glass as Hailey turned toward their audience. Her parents, her brother Ryan, various aunts and uncles who had long since learned that gatherings like this weren't about connection, they were about business. Family business. "And speaking of support," Hailey continued, voice thick with feigned sincerity, our nephew, has been accepted to a fantastic university." A pause, a smile. "But we all know how expensive tuition is these days." The weight in the room shifted. Hailey had orchestrated this moment perfectly, like a seasoned actress delivering a monologue that would ensure a standing ovation. But Marcus wasn't here for a performance. He was here for the truth. "I know how much education means to you, Marcus," Hailey said, resting a delicate hand on his arm. "You've always said that knowledge is the best investment." She turned to the room, inviting them into her well-constructed illusion. "And that's why we have decided," her fingers tightened on his wrist, a silent order to play along, "that we will cover the tuition." Silence. Not the kind that came from shock or hesitation. No, this was something else. A stillness born from expectation. Everyone knew Marcus had the money. He was the financial powerhouse of the family. His investments, his meticulous planning, none of it was lost on them. And now, they were waiting for the inevitable nod of agreement, the moment where he would, as he always had, play the role they assigned him. But Marcus didn't nod. Instead, he set his wine glass down, the clink of crystal against polished wood slicing through the quiet like a blade. He met Hailey's gaze, unwavering, unyielding. "Before I sign any checks," he said, voice measured, deliberate, "I have something for you." The envelope appeared in his hands like magic. He had kept it in his jacket, resting over his heart like a loaded weapon, waiting for this exact moment. He slid it across the table. The shift in Hailey's expression was a work of art. Confidence flickered, confusion crept in, and for the first time all evening, her carefully constructed mask threatened to slip. "What's this?" she asked, though the slight tremor in her voice betrayed her. Marcus leaned forward, his voice a murmur designed to cut deep. "Open it." A beat, then another. The room felt smaller now, the air tighter, the chandelier above casting long, sharp shadows as Hailey hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the envelope before finally, with a hesitant exhale, she peeled it open and pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. The silence that followed was different. He watched the color drain from her face, her lips parting in a soundless exclamation. It took her a full 3 seconds before she could even breathe out a single word. "No." Marcus tilted his head, feigning curiosity. "No." Hailey swallowed, hard. Her eyes darted toward Ryan, her brother, before she caught herself, forcing them back to the page, as if rereading the words would somehow change their meaning. 0% match. The words left her lips like a death sentence. A sharp inhale from Ryan. A muffled gasp from their mother. A stunned, disbelieving mutter from their father. Hailey gripped the document so tightly, her nails pressing into the paper like she could rip apart the truth itself. The air was thick with unspoken horrors, with unsaid understandings. But Marcus wasn't done. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about proving a lie. This was about erasing the con. So he reached into his jacket once more, producing a second envelope, placing it on the table with the same practiced patience. Hailey flinched. Ryan looked like he wanted to run. "Marcus?" He smiled. "Before you say anything," he said, voice smooth as silk, "there's something else you should see." Hailey's breath hitched as she stared at the second envelope. Her fingers twitched, like she wanted to snatch it up and incinerate it before its contents could see the light of day. But Marcus wasn't going to give her that luxury. Not this time. The family wasn't whispering anymore. They were waiting. Eyes flicked between Hailey, Ryan, and Marcus, the tension in the room thick enough to suffocate. The hum of the chandelier above them, the faint clink of a fork being nervously set down, the sharp inhale of Hailey's mother, it all became background noise to the war unfolding at the table. Marcus didn't move, didn't push. He just sat there, watching, waiting, because he knew Hailey. He knew her better than she thought he did. She wouldn't refuse to open it. No, she was dying to open it. Because Hailey was a control freak, and right now, she was spiraling. She had played this game for years. Always 3 steps ahead. Always the perfect mix of innocence and persuasion, always making sure that when the dust settled, she was the one standing on top. But she wasn't standing now. She was sinking, and she knew it. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Her eyes flicked to Ryan again, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, his hand gripping his knee under the table. His face, which had been flushed moments ago, was now a ghostly shade of panic. Marcus caught it all. Every twitch, every glance, every silent plea. Still, he said nothing. And finally, Hailey reached for the envelope. Her hands weren't as steady now. The confidence, the calculated grace, the certainty that she could smooth talk her way out of anything gone. She slid her finger under the flap, her breath quick and shallow, then pulled out the crisp white document inside. Her eyes darted over the first few lines, her lips moving in silence as she read. Then, her entire body jerked back, like she had been shot. No, it was barely a whisper. Then a more forceful, this is a lie. Marcus arched an eyebrow. Is it? Hailey slammed the paper onto the table as if that would somehow undo the damage. This, she gasped, turning to her father now, looking for anything, an anchor, a lifeline, a way out. This isn't legal. It can't be legal. Marcus tapped the page with 2 fingers. It is. Her father, Robert, finally reached across the table, snatching up the paper before Hailey could try to destroy it. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the words, his face hardening with every passing second. Hailey watched him, waited for him to argue, to defend her, to fix this. But he didn't. Instead, his face paled. His lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. And when he looked up, it wasn't at Hailey. It was at Marcus. You added this clause? His voice was dangerously low, controlled, but only just. Marcus leaned forward slightly, hands steepled in front of him. I did. The room tilted. Not physically, but in power. The control Hailey had clung to so fiercely slipped like water through her fingers, and now? Marcus had it all. Hailey lunged for the paper, but Robert yanked it back. His eyes, sharp and cold, locked onto hers. Is it true? Hailey opened her mouth, closed it, then turned to Marcus, her expression morphing into something ugly. You knew. The words dripped with venom. Marcus tilted his head, a slow, deliberate movement. I suspected. Hailey's breath shuddered. And you, she swallowed, forcing composure back into place. What? You had a lawyer change our trust? Without telling me. Marcus smiled, slow and dangerous. You're a financial consultant, Hailey. You know exactly how legal amendments work. And let's not pretend you didn't try to manipulate our trust before. Hailey flinched. And that's when the room truly exploded. Her mother gasped. Her father shot out of his chair. Ryan, suddenly realizing exactly how exposed he was, shoved his own chair back so fast it scraped against the hardwood floor. Wait, what the hell is this? Ryan's voice cracked. Marcus ignored him, his gaze locked onto Hailey like a predator sizing up its prey. See, the thing about fraud, he let the word linger, savoring the way Hailey tensed, is that it voids everything, including financial benefits. Robert's fists clenched at his sides. How much? Marcus exhaled through his nose, leaning back again. Half. A collective inhale. Hailey's mother swayed in her seat, a hand pressed against her chest. Half of she choked, eyes wild. Marcus nodded. Half of the entire family trust. He flicked his gaze to Hailey, watching her unravel. Which you just lost. Hailey made a strangled noise. Her entire life, her security, her power, had rested on the financial empire her family had built. And now? Gone. Because of him. Because he had outplayed her. Because she had lost. But Marcus wasn't finished. No, not yet. Because there was still one more card to play. So he turned to Ryan and smiled. Oh, and Ryan? He said it so casually, so effortlessly, that it took Ryan a second too long to realize the ground was about to drop from beneath him. Marcus slid another envelope across the table. A third one. Ryan didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even blink. Marcus tapped the envelope. You might want to open that. Ryan didn't move. The envelope sat in front of him, a loaded gun with the safety off, waiting for him to pull the trigger on his own destruction. His fingers twitched at his sides, his knee bouncing beneath the table. He was a man trapped between two choices: open it and die publicly, or leave it sealed and live in denial a few minutes longer. The room was suffocatingly silent. The kind of silence that wasn't just absence of sound, but a vacuum that sucked the air straight from your lungs. Ryan's father, Robert, exhaled sharply, his patience evaporating. Open it. Ryan flinched. His father's tone left no room for argument. Slowly, like a condemned man walking the steps to his own execution, Ryan reached for the envelope. His hands weren't steady. Marcus watched, perfectly still, the ghost of a smirk barely tugging at the corner of his mouth. This was the moment he had orchestrated, the moment the truth would cut deeper than any knife. Ryan tore the seal, pulled out the crisp document, and his throat locked. His eyes darted across the page once, then again, like if he read it fast enough, he could somehow change the words written there. Then, a sharp, broken inhale. What the hell is this? His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. It's what I like to call proof. Ryan's head jerked up, wild eyes locking onto Marcus. This is a goddamn bank statement. Not just any bank statement, Marcus corrected smoothly. It's your bank statement. Specifically, the one linked to the offshore account Hailey's been funneling money into. The table erupted. Hailey gasped, whipping toward Ryan. What? No, that's not true. But her voice wavered, because even she knew Marcus wouldn't come with half-truths. Not him. Ryan's mother let out a horrified whisper. Ryan, tell me this isn't real. Ryan's lips parted, but no words came out. Because what could he say? That it was all a coincidence? That his name had just accidentally appeared on an account that had seen hundreds of thousands of dollars move through it in the last 2 years? Robert grabbed the document, his eyes scanning it with the sharp precision of a man who had built an empire from nothing. A man who knew exactly how money worked. His face darkened. He turned to his son. Is it yours? Ryan didn't answer. That was answer enough. His mother let out a strangled sob. Oh my God. Hailey was still frozen, her brain scrambling for an exit that didn't exist. But Marcus wasn't done. He wasn't nearly done. I'll admit, he said, exhaling as he leaned back lazily in his chair. I almost missed it. Hailey's clever. I'll give her that. He gestured toward her with his glass of wine. She knew I'd be watching her accounts. She knew I'd track where her money went. He set the glass down with a soft clink. But what she didn't count on, he continued, was me digging into yours. Ryan's face was sheer panic. This isn't what it looks like. He tried, but his voice lacked conviction. Marcus let out a small laugh. Ryan, it looks like your sister has been moving money into an account in your name for over 2 years. It looks like she's been using my money, our money, to fund whatever the hell you two were up to. And if you're about to tell me it isn't what it looks like. He let the words hang, the implication crystal clear. Ryan's mouth snapped shut. Robert let out a slow, measured breath, his rage controlled but simmering beneath the surface. I want to know everything, he said, voice eerily calm. But Ryan wasn't going to talk. Not yet. He was still processing, still calculating, still looking for any way out. Hailey, on the other hand, she wasn't looking for an escape. She was looking for blood. Her chair scraped against the floor as she stood, turning on Ryan like a viper. You idiot, she hissed. I told you not to keep anything in your name. The room froze. The stupidity of her words settled in slow, like poison creeping through the air. Because what she should have said was, this isn't true. What she should have done was deny, fight, pretend this was all some grand misunderstanding. But instead, she had just admitted it. Marcus smirked. So there was something to keep hidden? Hailey's eyes darted to him, and in that moment, she knew she had walked straight into the slaughterhouse. Ryan pushed up from his chair, shaking his head. No, you don't get to put this all on me, Hailey. His voice was rising now, panic morphing into desperation. You're the one who started this whole thing. You're the one who... Enough. Robert's voice slammed through the chaos, bringing everything to a screeching halt. Silence. He turned to Marcus, jaw tight, eyes filled with something unreadable. How long have you known? Marcus shrugged. Long enough. He folded his hands together. I wanted to see how far she'd push it. Turns out, he gestured around the wreckage of their family dinner pretty far. Robert nodded once, as if coming to terms with an unspoken truth. Then he turned to Hailey. You're out. Hailey blinked. What? You are out. Robert's voice left no room for argument. You and your brother. Consider your access revoked. Hailey staggered back a step, eyes wide, mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Dad, you can't. I can, Robert said, steel in his voice. And I will. A finality settled over the room. Marcus stood, adjusting his jacket. He turned to Robert, nodding once in acknowledgement. Then he looked at Hailey one last time. You thought I was just going to let you take my money, he murmured, voice so low only she could hear. You thought I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't fight back. Her lip trembled. Marcus smiled. You bet on the wrong man. Then he walked out, leaving her, Ryan, and the ruins of their perfect little scheme behind him. Marcus stepped out of the suffocating dining room, the murmur of stunned voices fading behind him. The night air was cool against his skin, crisp with the scent of pine and distant ocean salt. He took a slow, measured breath, savoring the clarity of it. Because inside that house, inside that pit of vipers, the air had been toxic. A sharp, hurried set of footsteps followed him onto the stone pathway. Marcus, wait. Hailey. Her voice didn't carry its usual velvet manipulation, that carefully controlled charm she used when she wanted something. No, this was raw. Panicked. The voice of a woman whose entire foundation had just crumbled beneath her. Marcus didn't stop walking. She ran to catch up, her heels clicking furiously against the pavement. Marcus, please. Just let me explain. He laughed. Actually laughed. A dry, humorless sound. Explain? Hailey, I just gave you the stage in there, and you did explain. He turned his head slightly, his sharp gaze cutting into her like a scalpel. Quite well, in fact. Her breath hitched, her expression twisting with frustration. I mean, this isn't what you think. Marcus finally halted. He turned, taking his time, making sure she felt every agonizing second of his scrutiny. Really? He mused. Because what I think is that you've been siphoning money out of our trust for years. He took a step closer, watching her flinch. What I think is that you built this whole sob story around your nephew, the word dripped with mockery. So I'd blindly hand over hundreds of thousands without ever looking too closely. Her lips parted, but he wasn't done. And what I think, he stepped even closer, so she had to tilt her chin up to hold his gaze, is that you knew he wasn't your nephew all along. Hailey's face went deathly pale. Bingo. Marcus exhaled sharply, shaking his head. God, Hailey. His voice was almost disappointed. Your own brother? You didn't even have the decency to look outside your own bloodline? She swallowed hard. It wasn't like that. Marcus tilted his head. No? So tell me, what was it like? Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Because there was no explanation. Nothing she could say that would untangle the web of deceit she had woven around herself. Marcus had given her enough rope, and she had hanged herself with it. Her fingers trembled as she reached out, barely grazing his wrist. Please. Her voice cracked. I made a mistake. But you love me, Marcus. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, tears that might have worked years ago. Don't you? Marcus stared at her. At the woman he had once believed in. The woman he had built a life with. And then he did something that made Hailey's breath catch in her throat. He smiled. A slow, knowing, merciless smile. Love, he echoed. Hailey, you don't even know what love is. Her face crumpled. And then, like a wild animal sensing the bars of its cage closing in, her sorrow twisted into something ugly. You bastard, she spat. You think you're so much better than me? You think you're some kind of untouchable saint? She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You married me, Marcus. You chose me. So what does that make you? Marcus's expression didn't change. Smarter than you thought. The venom in her eyes turned ice cold. You're going to regret this. Marcus let out a slow breath, stepping back, his hands slipping into his pockets as if the conversation had already bored him. See, that's the difference between us, Hailey. His gaze locked onto hers, steady, unshaken. I never make investments I can't afford to lose. And with that, he turned, walked away, left her standing there, shaking, her perfectly constructed life burning to the ground. But as he reached his car, as he slid into the driver's seat and let the engine purr to life, Marcus knew. This wasn't over. Not yet. Because Hailey? She was never the kind to go down without a fight. The next morning, Marcus sat in his downtown office, overlooking the city skyline, sipping his coffee with the kind of calm that only came after setting fire to a meticulously laid-out con. He had barely finished his first sip when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He smirked. Hailey wasn't wasting time. He let it ring out. Seconds later, a text appeared. You think you won? We'll see about that. Marcus chuckled, setting his coffee down. Predictable. Hailey had spent years bending people to her will, calculating their every move before they made it. She had never been outmaneuvered until last night. She wasn't handling it well. A knock at the door. His assistant, Lila, poked her head in. Mr. Calloway, there's, someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. Marcus already knew who it was. He took another sip of coffee, pretending to consider. Did she make an appointment? Lila hesitated. No, but... Then tell her I'm busy. Before Lila could relay the message, Hailey shoved past her into the office. Her hair was still perfectly styled, but there was an edge to her. Her usual poise cracked at the edges, fury simmering just beneath her polished surface. Lila turned to Marcus, alarmed. He waved her off. It's fine, Lila. Close the door on your way out. Lila did as she was told, though she shot Marcus a "Do you want me to call security" look before leaving. The second the door clicked shut, Hailey launched into it. You humiliated me. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Good morning to you too, darling. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. You think this is a joke? No, he said, standing, adjusting his cufflinks with infuriating ease. I think this is justice. Hailey let out a sharp breath, pacing. Do you know what you did last night? My parents, my father, finally saw you for what you are? Marcus supplied. Yeah, that was the point. Her eyes burned with rage. You ruined me. Marcus scoffed. You ruined yourself the moment you thought you could play me for a fool. But go on, tell me how I did this to you. I love a good revisionist history lesson. Hailey's nails dug into her palms, but then, just like that, she inhaled, and the switch flipped. The tears welled. Her shoulders slumped. Her voice softened, cracking just enough to sound raw. Marcus, please. He almost laughed. Even now, she was trying to play him. You don't get to do that anymore, Hailey, he said, shaking his head. You don't get to manipulate me with crocodile tears. Her face twisted into something ugly for half a second before she caught herself, schooling her features back into a mask of forced composure. Fine, she spat. If you're so dead set on being cruel, then I hope you're prepared for what comes next. Marcus exhaled, feigning exhaustion. Let me guess. Threats? Lies? Desperate attempts to cling to the last shreds of your empire. Her lips curled into a vicious smirk. You always think you're the smartest guy in the room. But you're forgetting something, darling. He tilted his head. Enlighten me. Her voice dropped. I know where your skeletons are buried. Marcus stilled. Not externally, he was the picture of unbothered indifference. But internally? His mind moved at lightning speed, dissecting, calculating. Hailey saw the flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, and her smirk widened. Oh, that got your attention, didn't it? Marcus leaned against his desk, crossing his arms. You don't have anything on me, Hailey. If you did, you wouldn't be here making threats. You'd already be using it. Her expression shifted ever so slightly, a crack in her confidence. But she recovered quickly. You sure about that? Marcus held her gaze, unblinking. 100%. For a moment, she just stared at him, her mind working in overdrive. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out. He didn't stop her. Didn't follow. Just watched as she left, knowing with absolute certainty. This wasn't over. Not yet. Marcus waited until the door slammed shut behind Hailey before exhaling slowly, rolling his shoulders like a fighter shaking off the first round of a brutal match. Skeletons. It was an empty threat. Hailey was grasping at anything to get back control. But the thing about people like her? They didn't know when to stop. She had no winning hand left, but she'd keep bluffing until she backed herself into a deeper hole. Marcus smirked. Fine by me. His phone buzzed. Another text. Ryan, we need to talk. Marcus chuckled. Oh, now you want to talk? He ignored it. Ryan had made his choices, he could rot in them. Instead, Marcus turned back to his desk, pulled open a drawer, and grabbed the thick, leather-bound folder inside. She thinks she's the only one with leverage? She had no idea what was coming. That night, Marcus pulled into his gated estate, the security lights flickering on as he parked. He stepped out, rolling his sleeves up as he walked toward the house, when a shadow moved near the front porch. Marcus didn't break stride, but his muscles tensed. He reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against the cool steel of the knife he always carried. Then, Marcus. He let out a breath through his nose. Of course. Ryan, he greeted, his voice flat. Ryan stood just outside the porch light's glow, his hands shoved into the pockets of his expensive jacket like he was some kid who'd just been caught shoplifting. His eyes darted around, paranoid, twitchy. Marcus walked past him, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. I'm not interested. Ryan followed. Just let me explain. Marcus turned so fast Ryan flinched. Explain what, exactly? His voice was quiet. Too quiet. Ryan swallowed. I wasn't the one who. Marcus laughed, shaking his head. Don't insult my intelligence. You were her goddamn co-conspirator. Ryan's jaw clenched. I didn't have a choice. Marcus cocked his head. Didn't have a choice? He took a slow, deliberate step forward, forcing Ryan back into the wall. Let me make something very clear, Ryan. His voice dropped into something sharp, lethal. You always had a choice. You just chose the one that benefited you the most. Ryan didn't deny it. Couldn't. Marcus exhaled, stepping back. What do you want? Ryan hesitated. Hailey's. She's going to do something. Something big. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Oh. Ryan swallowed hard. She's meeting with someone tomorrow. A lawyer. But not just any lawyer, that lawyer. Ah. Now that was interesting. She's going to try to go nuclear, Ryan said. If she can't fix this, she's going to burn everything down, including you. Marcus leaned back, considering. And why, exactly, are you telling me this? Ryan's eyes darted away. Because if she goes down, she's taking me with her. Marcus let the silence stretch, savoring the desperation radiating off Ryan like cheap cologne. Pathetic, he murmured. Ryan flinched like he'd been slapped. Marcus, save it. Marcus turned away, already walking toward the stairs. You made your bed, Ryan. Lie in it. Ryan was still standing there, fidgeting, waiting for something, anything. A lifeline. Marcus didn't give him one. Because tomorrow, Hailey was about to learn the hard way that when you try to play games with a man like him, you always lose. The next morning, Marcus sat in his car outside a towering glass law firm, his fingers drumming idly against the leather steering wheel. Hailey thought she was smart, thought she was dangerous, but she was predictable. She had to strike back. Her ego wouldn't allow anything else. And if Ryan's panicked warning was accurate, she was about to try something big. Marcus glanced at his watch. 9:55 a.m. Hailey's appointment was scheduled for 10 o'clock. Right on cue, a sleek black sedan pulled up across the street. The back door opened, and out stepped Hailey, dressed in a pristine white power suit like she was marching into a battlefield she knew she was going to win. Marcus smiled. Let's see about that. He watched as she strode into the law firm's lobby, her head held high, her stride measured. She thought she still had moves left. She was about to learn she had none. Marcus took the elevator up 3 floors, slipping inside the firm's waiting area just as Hailey was being led into a conference room. Her lawyer was already seated, Grant Leland, a ruthless, cutthroat attorney who specialized in scorched earth tactics. The kind of man people hired when they wanted war, not settlements. Marcus let the receptionist greet him, then walked straight past her. The moment he stepped into the conference room, Hailey froze mid-sentence. Her eyes widened in shock. Then, just as quickly, she masked it. What are you doing here? Marcus smiled, easy and controlled. Oh, I just figured if you were going to try and destroy my life, I should at least get a front row seat. Grant Leland folded his hands, eyeing Marcus with a measured look. Mr. Calloway, this is a private meeting. Marcus ignored him, closing the door behind him before sliding a thick manila envelope onto the table in front of Hailey. Before we get into whatever nonsense you're about to spin, I have a little gift for you. Hailey hesitated, then slowly reached for the envelope. Her manicured nails slid under the flap. She pulled out the stack of documents inside, her brow furrowing as she flipped through them. Her face went rigid. Marcus leaned in slightly. Go on, Hailey. Tell Mr. Leland what you're holding. She swallowed hard. This is a full forensic audit of your offshore accounts, Marcus finished for her. Statements, wire transfers, shell companies you tried to bury under fake trusts. His voice remained even, calm. All of it. Leland reached out, taking the papers from Hailey's stiff hands. His expression remained neutral as he skimmed the contents, until his jaw ticked. Marcus smirked. Not the kind of case you want to back, is it, Grant? Leland said nothing. But Hailey? She snapped. Her chair scraped back violently as she shot to her feet. You bastard. Marcus stayed seated, unaffected. Sit down, Hailey. How dare you? Sit down. Something in his voice, something final, made her hesitate. She slowly lowered herself back into her chair, but her whole body was trembling with barely contained rage. Marcus tilted his head. You really thought I wouldn't check? You thought I would notice millions of dollars vanishing. Leland cleared his throat. Mrs. Calloway. Don't, Hailey snapped. Don't act like you didn't know. She turned back to Marcus, seething. You think this scares me? You think this changes anything? Marcus exhaled through his nose, tapping the edge of the table. Of course it does. He reached into his jacket, pulled out one last document, and slid it across the table. Leland picked it up first. He read the first few lines, then sighed, rubbing his temple. Jesus Christ. Hailey snatched it from him. She barely made it halfway down the page before she slammed it down. You wouldn't dare. Marcus smiled. I already did. Hailey's voice dropped to a furious whisper. You filed for divorce? With cause, Marcus confirmed. And with that little stunt you pulled with Ryan? You won't see a single cent. Her nostrils flared. I built this life with you. Marcus leaned forward, his smile cutting. No, Hailey. You built a lie, and I just burned it to the ground. She was breathing hard now, her carefully constructed world collapsing in real time. Marcus straightened, buttoning his jacket. "Enjoy your meeting," he said smoothly. Oh, he turned just before exiting, throwing one last dagger. "And good luck finding another lawyer." Then he walked out, leaving her world in ashes. Marcus stepped out of the law firm with the kind of calm that came after delivering a death blow. The sun was blinding against the glass facade of the building, but all he could see was the look on Hailey's face, pure, unfiltered panic. She had walked in expecting to destroy him. She had walked out knowing she had already lost. But Marcus wasn't stupid. Cornered animals were the most dangerous. And Hailey? She wasn't just dangerous. She was desperate. That night, he was in his study, nursing a whiskey when his phone buzzed. A call. Unknown number. Marcus sighed. Again? He let it ring out. A minute later, a text came through. "Meet me at the old club. 30 minutes. No excuses." Marcus exhaled through his nose. Ryan. He debated ignoring it. Let the idiot drown in his own mess. Then again, Ryan wasn't bold enough to summon him like this unless something was seriously wrong. And Marcus had a feeling he already knew who was behind it. The club was an old haunt, one he and Ryan had frequented before Hailey had sunk her claws in. A private lounge, dimly lit, quiet enough for men in suits to talk business without prying ears. Marcus walked in and immediately spotted Ryan at a booth in the back. He was nursing a half-empty glass of something expensive, his knee bouncing under the table. Marcus slid into the seat across from him. "You have 5 minutes." Ryan looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "I screwed up, man." Marcus tilted his head. "That's not news." Ryan let out a ragged breath, running a hand through his hair. "Hailey's losing it. She's talking to—" He glanced around, then leaned in. "Dangerous people." Marcus's jaw tightened. "What kind of dangerous?" Ryan hesitated. "The kind that don't ask for money back. The kind that take it." Marcus stared at him. "She owes people?" Ryan nodded quickly. "Big time. And now that you've cut her off," he swallowed. "She's desperate. She's making deals she shouldn't." Marcus exhaled slowly. "And why, exactly, are you telling me this?" Ryan's fingers tapped against the table. "Because if she goes down, she's dragging everyone with her. And you? You're the biggest target she's got left." Marcus smirked. "She already tried lawyers. That didn't work. Now she's resorting to this." Ryan nodded. "She's blaming you for everything, man. She's not thinking straight." He exhaled. "I think she wants to set you up." Marcus went still. Ryan swallowed. "I heard her on the phone. She's planning something. I don't know what, but she said she just needed one thing to nail you." Marcus leaned back, expression unreadable. "And let me guess. You want to switch sides now? Be on the winning team?" Ryan's jaw clenched. "I want to survive." Marcus let that hang for a second. Then he smirked. "Too late for that." Ryan paled. "Marcus." Marcus stood. "You chose her over me years ago, Ryan." He adjusted his cufflinks. "Now you can sync with her." Ryan reached out, desperation in his eyes. "Marcus, please." Marcus turned without another word and walked out. Because now? It wasn't just about winning. It was about finishing this. Marcus drove through the city, his fingers tightening around the steering wheel. The information Ryan had given him gnawed at the edges of his mind. Hailey was spiraling, making desperate moves. He had seen her manipulate, deceive, and lie with a straight face. But this was reckless, even for her. And recklessness meant one thing. She was running out of options. Marcus parked in his private underground garage, stepping out into the cool, dimly lit space. The scent of oil and concrete hung in the air as he walked toward the elevator. Then, a shadow moved. Marcus didn't react outwardly, but his hand instinctively brushed against the knife in his pocket. "You're late." The voice was smooth, too controlled. Marcus exhaled slowly, turning. A man leaned against one of the steel columns, tall, broad, and dressed in an expensive but unassuming black suit. His posture was relaxed, but everything about him screamed dangerous. Marcus studied him for a beat. "You must be her new friend." The man smiled, slow and deliberate. "I prefer the term business associate." Marcus smirked. "I bet you do." The man pushed off the column, taking a few unhurried steps toward him. Here's the thing, Mr. Calloway. Hailey's made some investments, and she's in a bit of a cash flow problem now. Marcus raised an eyebrow. And this is my problem because... The man chuckled. Because you've got what she needs. He let the silence stretch. And if she doesn't get it, he sighed, almost regretfully. Let's just say it won't be good for either of you. Marcus let out a slow breath. You don't know me, so let me give you some free advice. He stepped closer, his voice calm, even. If you came here to scare me, you're wasting your time. If you came here with a deal, you're still wasting your time. The man studied him, his expression unreadable. Then he grinned. You're exactly like she said you'd be. Marcus tilted his head. And how's that? The man's grin widened. A problem? Marcus didn't blink. Good. A long silence. Then the man chuckled. All right. I'll tell her you're not playing. He turned, walking toward the exit. But you might want to watch your back, Calloway. Marcus watched him disappear into the shadows, his pulse steady. Let her come. Because when she did, it would be the last mistake she ever made. Marcus didn't go home that night. Instead, he went in his private office, not the one in the city, but the one no one knew about. A minimalist space in a high-rise under a shell company, complete with reinforced walls, encrypted servers, and everything he needed to stay 10 steps ahead. He poured himself a drink, setting the crystal tumbler on the sleek black desk. The city lights sprawled beneath him, glittering like an empire waiting to be claimed. He picked up his phone, dialed. It rang twice before a voice answered. Did she take the bait? Marcus smirked. Hook, line, and sinker. There was a small chuckle on the other end. She really went to them? Jesus. She must be drowning. Oh, she's not just drowning, Marcus mused, swirling his drink. She's clawing at anything to keep her head above water. And when people panic, they make mistakes, the voice finished. Exactly. A pause. Then, so what's next? Marcus leaned back, his fingers tapping idly against the glass. Now, we bury her. The next morning, Marcus walked into the lobby of his main office, looking every bit the composed, untouchable man Hailey had spent years trying to control. Lila, his assistant, greeted him with a look that told him something was up. Mr. Calloway, there's... Let me guess, he interrupted smoothly. My soon-to-be ex-wife? Lila exhaled. She's waiting in your office. Marcus smirked. Of course she is. He adjusted his cuffs, walked past reception, and stepped inside. Hailey was standing by the window, her back to him, looking out over the skyline like she owned it. She turned the second he shut the door. You think you're so smart, she hissed, walking toward him, her movement sharp, calculated. You think you've won? Marcus set his briefcase down. I know I've won, Hailey. Her nostrils flared. You don't understand what you're playing with. You. Marcus sighed, pulling his chair out and sitting with infuriating ease. What's the play here, Hailey? You storm into my office, make some dramatic threats, hope I crack. Her eyes gleamed with something dark. You should be the one worried, Marcus. He arched an eyebrow. Oh. She smirked. Because I still have one move left. Marcus tilted his head, watching her. Do tell. She leaned forward, placing her hands on his desk. You want to destroy me? Fine. But if I go down, I'm taking you with me. He didn't blink. And how exactly do you plan on doing that? She grinned. Because I still control the narrative. And when I tell the world that you manipulated me, controlled me, forced me into financial ruin. Marcus laughed. A deep, rich, genuine laugh. Hailey's smirk faltered. You really think that's going to work? He asked, shaking his head. You think anyone's going to believe you after the evidence I have? Her jaw clenched. You don't get it, do you? She straightened, smoothing down her pristine blazer. This isn't about facts, Marcus. It's about perception. Marcus exhaled. And what perception is that? She gave him a slow, knowing look. The one where you're the villain. And that was when Marcus saw it. She wasn't trying to win in the courts. She was trying to win in the public eye. She wasn't going after his money. She was going after his legacy. And that was a mistake. Because if Hailey wanted to play this game, Marcus would make sure it ended with her name in ruins. Marcus exhaled through his nose, slowly setting his whiskey tumbler down on the desk. His patience, already razor-thin, was at its breaking point. Hailey was done playing defense. She was going on the offensive. But what she didn't realize, she had just stepped onto his battlefield. He steepled his fingers, studying her like a chess piece that had just walked itself into checkmate. You think public perception is going to save you? His voice was calm, almost amused. That you can spin this into some sob story where I'm the heartless, controlling husband who left his poor, helpless wife in financial ruin? Hailey lifted her chin defiantly. People don't care about facts, Marcus. They care about drama. A good story. And I have one. She leaned in slightly. All I need is the right audience. Marcus smirked. Oh, Hailey. He exhaled, shaking his head. You really don't understand who you're dealing with. For the first time, a flicker of unease crossed her face. See, Marcus continued, leaning back in his chair. While you were busy rehearsing your victim monologue, I was preparing for war. Hailey scoffed. You can't control public perception, Marcus. Can't I? His smirk widened. Her confidence wavered. What did you do? Marcus stood, adjusting the cuffs of his crisp white shirt. I took a page out of your book, darling. He rounded the desk, standing directly in front of her now, his presence suffocating. I made sure that by the time you opened your mouth, he smiled, no one would be listening. Hailey's lips parted slightly, her breath quickening. Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket, tapped the screen a few times, then turned it to face her. A breaking news notification glowed brightly. Exclusive. Leaked financial records reveal massive offshore fraud scheme. Hailey Calloway implicated in embezzlement scandal. Hailey froze. Her face drained of all color as she reached for the phone with shaking fingers. She scrolled, her eyes darting over the article's brutal summary. Marcus watched as her world collapsed in real time. I didn't just bring legal receipts, Hailey, he murmured, his voice silk over steel. I brought the public receipts. The kind that matter. She stumbled back a step, her breath shallow. No. Yes. She looked up, her pupils blown wide. You leaked this. Marcus slid his phone back into his pocket. I had options, he admitted. The courts, the IRS, but that would have taken years. You, however, his eyes gleamed. You wanted a story. He gestured toward the headline. So I gave them one. Hailey shook her head, her hands trembling. This is defamation. You can't just. Oh, but I can. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. And I did. Hailey's breathing was erratic now. She turned in frantic circles, like a caged animal searching for an exit. This isn't real. This can't be real. Marcus just watched. Because this was poetic. For years, she had manipulated people with lies, spun realities to fit her narrative. Now, she was watching the world turn against her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Her phone buzzed violently in her pocket. She scrambled to pull it out, and Marcus saw the brief flash of the screen. Mom. A beat. Then another. She declined the call. Then another call. Robert Calloway. Declined. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Not taking their calls? Her nostrils flared. You bastard. He laughed, a slow, dark chuckle. Funny. That's the same thing your father probably just called you. She lunged at him. Marcus caught her wrist effortlessly, twisting it just enough to make her stop but not enough to actually hurt her. He stared down at her, his grip firm. Be very careful about your next move, Hailey. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her eyes burning with the kind of rage that came from complete and total defeat. Marcus let go. She stumbled back, seething. You think this is over? Marcus gave her a slow, knowing smile. It is for you. Hailey's fists clenched, her nails digging into her palms so hard they left crescent-shaped indentations. You will regret this. Marcus stepped back, smoothing out his shirt. No, Hailey. You regret it. Then, as she stood there shaking, her empire crumbling around her, Marcus did the one thing she never thought he'd do. He turned his back on her and walked away, because she wasn't his problem anymore. She never had been. She was just another bad investment. Hailey stood frozen, her phone still buzzing with unanswered calls. The weight of her downfall was crushing her, but Marcus was already done. As he walked out, the sound of the city swallowing him whole, he didn't look back. By the time she tried to fight back, it was too late. The banks froze her accounts. Her family, publicly humiliated, cut her off completely. The media feasted on her like vultures. Ryan? He tried to disappear, but Marcus had already arranged for the right people to look into his finances. He wasn't going anywhere. And Hailey? She tried one last desperate move, crying to the press, playing the victim. It backfired spectacularly. By the end of the week, she was buried in lawsuits, broke, and abandoned. Marcus? He simply moved on. Because in the end, she had never been a worthy opponent. Just another fraud who thought she could outplay a man who never loses.